The sky above Veltara rippled with soft lavender clouds, luminous and laced with sparkling pollen trails that shimmered like confetti caught mid-fall. It was beautiful, achingly so, but to Leo Ramirez, hunched beside a bowl of beige-green root paste, beauty didn't mean much when his stomach sounded like it was chewing through itself. 2 weeks, 14 days of leaf water, spiraled tuber strings, and something gelatinous that squirmed faintly when stirred. Every meal was a ceremony, every bite was a struggle, and every polite smile he forced was just one more crack in the dam of his patience. Leo stared blankly at the sticky paste, its surface dotted with pale seeds that pulsed faintly in the sunlight. "Is it supposed to do that?" he asked aloud, then shook his head. There was no one nearby who'd give him an answer he wanted. From the central dome of the settlement, melodic chimes rang out Veltaran noon. That meant another 10 hours before the sun dipped, and the priests invited everyone to sit in a circle and chew moss while reciting photosynthesis poems. He hadn't come to Veltara for this. Well, not just this. The Interworld Exchange program had sounded like the adventure of a lifetime. 1 year of immersive cultural exchange, planetary diplomacy training, language symbiosis implants, and yes, an advanced botany elective. Leo had been excited, but no one mentioned the diet. Every Veltaran he'd met glowed with serene confidence, their tall frames sheathed in shimmering leaf fiber robes, their skin cool and slightly bioluminescent. They worshipped plants, literally. Their temples were tree root cathedrals, their gods were ancient forest spirits, and meat was unthinkable. They didn't fear it because of morality, they feared it like you might fear fire in a library. Leo rubbed his temples, then stood slowly. His knees ached. Dizziness flirted with him as he grabbed his translation pendant from the bedside alcove. The implant in his neck helped, but sometimes the pendant filled in when idioms got lost in the neural lag. He checked his vitals on the settlement's monitor before heading out. Weight, down 6 pounds. Blood sugar, borderline. Energy level, 32%. It flashed a soft yellow warning. "No kidding," Leo muttered. He stepped outside and was immediately greeted by a gentle wind carrying the scent of crushed lavender stalks and something else bitter, chalky, unappetizing. A group of Veltaran children waved at him from a sculpted vine bridge. He waved back, then tried to walk with purpose. He needed answers. Or protein. The high botanist, Vermalou, was meditating near the central spiral, her limbs folded with disturbing symmetry atop a bed of blooming rootlings. She opened her eyes as he approached, calm as ever. "You appear disturbed, Leo Ramirez," she said, blinking slowly. "Have the sky blooms offended your senses?" "I'm starving," Leo said. "No offense." "Ah." She tilted her head. "Have you not adjusted to the nutrient pace schedule? We increased the moss protein by 0.7%. "It's not protein," he snapped, then softened. "I mean, it's not enough. I need real protein. Animal protein. You think humans are herbivores, right?" She nodded, smiling gently. "Your jaw design, molar shape, and lack of natural claws or venom all point to a plant-based ancestry. Our studies confirmed it." Leo sighed. "You saw a couple of dental charts and thought we grazed like sheep. Did anyone check our digestive enzymes, gut flora, brain development?" Vermalou blinked. "We assumed." Leo stared at her. "I haven't eaten anything solid in a week. I'm dizzy. My muscles are degrading. I need real food." "We cannot provide flesh," she said, her calm unbothered. "To slay a sentient's cousin is to disturb the harmony of soil and sky. I'm not asking you to. I'll find it myself." She frowned, barely. "You cannot survive the wilds. Even our warriors avoid the jungles beyond the ridge. The Gorvak roam there." Leo nodded once. "Then I'll avoid them too." That night, under the dim light of Veltara's twin moons, Leo packed a stolen toolkit, a patched field knife from his emergency supply box, and a telescoping pole he reworked into a spear with a reinforced crystal blade. The Veltarans didn't lock anything. Why would they? No one stole when everyone shared everything, and no one wanted more than what was allotted. But Leo wasn't Veltaran. He left without ceremony, slipping through a service tunnel lined with humming root cables and into the dense fringe of the jungle. It wasn't cold, but his breath quickened in the oxygen-rich air. Every step felt like a betrayal. Every vine he pushed aside felt like it might wrap around his leg and drag him into some bioluminescent pit of judgment. Within hours, he was lost. The jungle was a riot of life. Not the chirping, crawling kind, but the pulsing, whispering kind. Trees shifted ever so slightly even when there was no wind. Fungi breathed. Leaves bent toward his body heat. Somewhere, something howled, a wet, gurgling sound that ended in a shriek. Leo kept moving. By morning, he'd found a stream that tasted faintly of iron and leaves. He drank anyway. His legs were already trembling. He'd slept for maybe 20 minutes, wedged into a hollow tree that smelled like lime and rot. His translation pendant buzzed with a local language signal, but didn't translate anything except danger and fertility, helpful. By the second day, he found tracks deep gouges in the mud, some overlaid with acidic burn marks that sizzled against the damp earth. He spotted scorched foliage, clawed bark, and a half-dissolved carcass of a long-legged creature that had once resembled a deer, but now looked like melting soap. Leo watched the area for hours, hidden beneath a growth of thick, spongy ferns. He waited until sundown, when the air cooled and the forest began to sing. Then the Gorvak appeared. It was bigger than he expected. 6 limbs, armored shoulders, tusks the size of his arm. Its body shimmered faintly, oozing with something that steamed on contact with plants. It sniffed, roared, and dug at the dirt near a cluster of phosphorescent vines. Leo gripped the spear. He didn't charge. That would be suicide. He waited until the beast lunged at something in the dark and turned broadside. Then he ran not at it, but past it, toward a snare he'd rigged hours before, a dangling net of sap-lined vines reinforced with metal filament from his survival blanket. The Gorvak chased him. Leo dived. The net sprang. The beast flailed. He didn't have long. Slashing behind the shoulder, Leo struck deep and fast, severing what he hoped was an artery. Acidic blood sprayed, but he was ready. He used a severed tree tube to direct the flow downward, avoiding splashback. The Gorvak thrashed for minutes, then collapsed, its heart still pumping enough to drain the worst of the fluid. His hands shook. His leg had been grazed during the run, shallow but bleeding. He cleaned it fast, stitched it without anesthesia, using his auto-patcher, then collapsed beside the massive carcass, breath ragged. It was done. He hung the beast upside down with makeshift pulleys, letting gravity and biology do the rest. That night, he didn't sleep, just sat in silence, tending to the fire, planning the roast, and imagining only for a moment the taste of earth barbecue, rich with charcoal and smoke. He wasn't a hunter by nature, but hunger made philosophers of some and monsters of others. And Leo Ramirez? He was just a college kid who wanted a decent meal. The jungle parted with grudging silence as Leo trudged back toward the settlement, dragging the charred black remains of a beast that had once made the forest itself cower. His left leg pulsed with heat, tense, swollen, stitched with uneven threads from a field medkit that was never meant to handle puncture trauma. He limped, sweat-drenched, clothes torn and crusted with soot and leaf mash. The smell that followed him wasn't just meat. It was the acrid residue of burnt acid and seared muscle fiber. A rich, wild scent of danger roasted clean. 3 days without sleep. 3 days living off boiled fern hearts and a single squirrel-like creature he'd smoked over coals, away from the main carcass. Even that had been a risk. He wasn't sure if Velteran wildlife carried toxins or symbiotic bacteria. But after the first bite of something solid, his body surged with a kind of desperate gratitude he hadn't felt since freshman year finals and vending machine jerky. Now, as the perimeter sensors of the settlement pinged softly, announcing his return, Leo stopped. He wasn't sure what he expected. Cheers? Screams? Arrest? He took one last breath, adjusted the rope, binding the Gorvak's back legs to his makeshift sledge of fire-hardened branches, and stepped forward. The first Velteran to see him froze, literally, mid-step, wide-eyed, then backed away, whispering something over a seed-shaped communicator. Others emerged from the gardens, drawn by the impossible scent drifting ahead of Leo like a banner. Spiced, smoky, warm, alive. By the time he reached the outer courtyard, a full crowd had gathered tall, reed-like figures in layered robes, silent and unmoving. The Gorvak's body thumped against the root-tiled ground, leaving a black smear. Leo planted his spear into the soil beside it, then nearly collapsed from the effort. Someone finally stepped forward, Priest Halvex, the same one who'd once lectured Leo on the moral vibration of tree sap. Halvex stared at the carcass. That is a Gorvak. Leo nodded slowly, wiping his brow. Its tusks still smoked slightly. Another Veltaran, younger, gagged softly and turned away. Halvex took a step back. Its blood corrodes stone. How did you survive the butchering? Leo knelt beside the sledge, forcing his body into motion. His stitched legs screamed. I severed a main artery while it was still alive, he said hoarsely. Hung it upside down, let the heart pump the blood out while it had rhythm. Kept clear of the spray, acids in the blood, not the meat. There was silence. No murmurs, no gasps, just stillness. And that smell. Leo gestured toward the pile of scavenged metal poles and stripped sapling branches he'd balanced across his shoulder. Going to need help setting this up. No one moved. He sighed. Fine, I'll do it myself. Pain was a constant now background noise that ebbed and spiked with each movement, but adrenaline had etched a kind of numb clarity into him. He worked fast, binding poles into a triangle, lashing branches into a rotisserie frame, then driving it into the ground near the community square's cook circle. It had never been used. For plants, Veltaran steamed everything through low-light heat bloomers. Fire was ceremonial. Leo lit it anyway. He used dried moss, a flint scrap, and the last few drops of earth issued ignition gel. The flame caught, grew. He hoisted the Gorvak carcass still heavy, even with muscle mass drained, and fastened it onto the frame. The smell changed. The meat crackled, the skin blistering open to reveal dark red muscle beneath. Steam hissed from acidless pockets, and rich fat dripped into the flame, flaring up with blue-green flashes. He'd rubbed the outside with herbs he'd found that didn't taste like soap, small, pungent leaves that smelled of pepper and citrus. Leo staggered back, collapsing onto a stone seat. His hands trembled. He forced himself to drink water, then slumped forward, eyes half-lidded. The Veltarans began to whisper. One stepped forward, a short, broad-shouldered woman Leo vaguely remembered from the healing dome. A biologist? A medic? She knelt near him, not too close. You survived an encounter with the Gorvak. Not gracefully, Leo muttered. You got a cold compress? Or antibiotics? I have root paste. Pass. She studied his leg. You need re-cleaning. The stitching is irregular. Was it done by an earth machine? He nodded. I will not touch the meat, she said, almost to herself. But I will tend to your wound. You should not move. Deal. She returned minutes later with a sterile kit, a gift from some past delegation. She worked in silence, carefully cutting his old stitches, cleaning the wound with an orange-scented liquid, and resealing the gash with smoother, tighter lines. Leo clenched his jaw throughout. No painkillers. He hated how much it showed in his face, but his hands were trembling too hard to hide. He didn't speak until she packed the last strip. Thanks. She nodded once. You killed it with only a spear. I had strategy, Leo said, and desperation. She looked back at the fire, where the meat had begun to darken into a deep, lustrous brown. It smells destabilizing. Leo chuckled weakly. That's garlic leaf. And hunger. Another figure stepped closer. A warrior by posture, though Veltaran armor was mostly ceremonial, woven bark and spirit dyes. I have never tasted death, he said, voice cautious. It's not death, Leo replied, eyes closed. It's survival, and, maybe, curiosity. The warrior crouched, sniffed near the edges of the fire. A child darted forward, wide-eyed, nostrils flaring. It smells like warm rain. Another hissed and pulled the child back. Veltaran society had no word for carnivory that wasn't tied to fear. No word for hunger that wasn't poetic. Leo had expected this. But he hadn't expected the line. It began as a few hesitant souls, scientists, some warriors, one very old priest, then more, drawn by scent, or awe, or confusion. The line formed in a hesitant curve around the fire, close but not touching, respectful and reverent and deeply shaken. Leo stood, wobbling, and began carving. The meat pulled away in ribbons, charred on the outside, tender within. He plated the first piece onto a sterile leaf, drizzled with seared sap fat, offered it without flourish. The old priest took it, trembling. He ate. His eyes widened. He swayed slightly. Then he sat, very slowly, and did not speak for a full minute. Someone else stepped forward, a botanist, then a mid-level scholar, then Halvex. Leo kept carving. He didn't eat, not yet. His stomach was still adjusting, and the medkit had advised against heavy digestion while recovering from trauma. But he watched as the circle widened, as someone brought out a reed flute, as children began to whisper stories of the meat hunter, the bloodless killer, the man who cooked the monster, and smiled. A small hand tugged at his sleeve. Leo looked down. The child offered him a garland, not of flowers, but braided vines dipped in rendered fat and scorched at the tips. A sacred gesture, he would later learn. A symbol once used only for those who dared stand before great storms and lived to tell others what the lightning tasted like. Leo took it, humbled. That night, the moons hung low, and the sky pulsed with stars. The jungle stayed quiet. And Veltara changed. By the fourth day after the roast, the settlement smelled different. Gone was the persistent, sweet rot perfume of flowering moss. Instead, everything, clothing, skin, breath, carried a faint tang of smoke and seared fat. It clung to the air like an echo, reshaping the ambiance of Veltara's once sterile tranquility into something new, something undefined. Leo sat beneath a trellis of twist vines near the main fountain, leg elevated on a padded stool. The dressing changed twice daily now by the same quiet biologist who refused to speak while tending him. He wasn't healing fast, he knew better than to expect miracles. The gash was closing, yes, but stiffness lingered. He walked short distances using a carved branch as a cane. His weight was climbing back slowly thanks to the strips of leftover meat he dried over the fire. Every bite was heavenly, not just for the flavor, but because it reminded him he was alive and getting stronger. There was no bravado in it, no ego, just necessity and gratitude. But the Veltarans were changing around him. Some subtly, a shift in posture, louder voices in group meetings, eye contact held longer. For a species conditioned to flow like reeds in the wind, some of them were beginning to resist the breeze. Others changed, not so subtly. "Your act has fractured harmony," said Elder Kevriel, head of the temple circle, pacing with agitation through the shaded council grove. "They whisper now. About strength, about appetite, about things we buried generations ago." Leo sat still, posture neutral, trying not to fidget as pain radiated up his thigh. "You mean they're curious?" "I mean they remember," Kevriel snapped. "The old fear, when predation was not a myth, but a reflex, when our kind ate the flesh of the dying under the lie of survival." "I didn't eat a Veltaran," Leo said plainly. "That does not matter. You rekindled the scent." There was a long pause. Leo broke it. "It's not just the meat, you know. It's what it took to get it. To kill something that makes your warriors run. To cook it safely. To eat it without dying." Kevriel stopped pacing. "And what point are you making, human?" Leo's gaze was steady. "That what I did wasn't monstrous. It was difficult. It required planning, skill, respect for danger. You romanticize slaughter. I romanticize resourcefulness." There was no answer. Kevriel left. That afternoon, Leo noticed the first public fire being built in the common plaza. It was small, a tight circle of sapless wood, no larger than a cooking pit. Several young Veltaran's warrior apprentices, by the looks of their robe bindings, stood around it, arguing softly about how to stack the fuel. A few had spice-laced leaves in hand. One had a strip of dried Gorvak meat Leo had traded to a curious biologist in exchange for antiseptic. They looked at him often, like students unsure if their teacher approved. He didn't wave, just watched. Then another fire started, this one behind the medic dome, near the herb gardens. This one was manned by 3 botanists, experimenting with cooking root stalks over the flame instead of steaming them. The aroma was nutty, layered, sharper than usual. It drew a small crowd. By sundown, 7 fires burned across the settlement. None for ceremonial use, all for cooking. Leo could barely believe it. Veltaran culture didn't pivot. It drifted, slow and steady like sap, but now the drift was turning into a ripple, and ripples tended to spread. Not everyone was pleased. Later that night, 2 shadowed figures approached Leo's corner of the settlement, where he rested under a wind-dried canopy. One wore a scholar's robe, the other a spirit weaver's sash. The scholar spoke first. "We ask only questions." Leo nodded, motioning to the seat across from him. "You taught them not only to eat meat," said the scholar, "but to confront fear with ritual. Did you mean to?" "I meant to not starve," Leo replied. "Anything beyond that wasn't the plan." The spirit weaver leaned forward. "You did not panic when wounded. You treated yourself mid-combat. That kind of mental clarity, it challenges what we believe about herbivorous sentience. Leo tilted his head. You thought humans were peaceful because of our teeth, but we're complex. We adapt. Fear helps us survive, but it doesn't rule us. The spirit weaver stared. This was not in the texts. Leo gave a tired smile. The texts probably didn't have a section on grilled ribs either. The scholar laughed quietly, but genuinely. Do you think it will continue? I think some of you are scared of what it means, Leo said. Others are curious. That usually means change. Change is dangerous, the weaver murmured. So is stagnation. They left without further questions. By the 6th day, the smell of meat had given way to something more volatile: division. A public forum was called in the central grove. Dozens gathered. The air was tense. Several fire pits still smoldered in the background. Leo was helped to a bench near the speaker's mound, wrapped in a vine cloth against the chill. Elder Kevril took the floor. We gather not to punish, he began, but to examine. What are we becoming? Have we remembered strength, or have we invited rot? There were murmurs of agreement. Then Halvek stepped up, voice calm but resolute. What was done was not rot. It was discipline, measured, thoughtful action in the face of decay. Leo Ramirez didn't bring chaos. He brought fire to where we feared even friction. Another elder, eyes sharp with skepticism, stepped forward. Fire can warm, or burn. Then we must learn not to flinch at warmth, said Halvex. From the crowd, a warrior apprentice stood. We felt pride when the beast fell. Are we not allowed to feel that? No, said Kevril sharply. Not without cost. That's when Leo spoke. I didn't come here to change you, he said, voice hoarse but steady. I came because your people believed in peace, and so do I. But peace isn't just silence, it's resilience. It's knowing you can stand firm when it matters. He leaned forward. You all feared the Gorvok, but you didn't know what it tasted like. You feared a shadow you never tried to understand. Now, some of you are learning not to flinch. That's not corruption. That's growth. The silence afterward wasn't hostile, just stunned. Then, a child Leo recognized her as the garland giver, shouted, Can we name a fire after him? Laughter broke the tension. Even Kevril exhaled, lips curling in what might have been amusement. That night, Veltara officially sanctioned its first culinary fire dome. It was built near the edge of the settlement, a compromise, far enough not to offend the purists, close enough for the curious to learn. Leo was asked to teach. He declined. I'm not a chef, he said. I'm a guy who got hungry. Still, he showed them how to sharpen sticks, how to test meat temperature without overcooking, how to balance flavors, how to listen for the right sizzle. His legs still hurt. Every step reminded him of the price he paid. The scar wouldn't fade for years. But that was okay, because now the smell of smoke no longer triggered fear. It triggered hunger. And the idea that maybe even on a world wrapped in roots and wrapped in custom, a little fire wasn't the end of harmony. Maybe it was the start of something stronger. The day of the solstice gathering arrived with ceremonial grace. Leaves across the high canopies had shifted hue, casting the settlement in an iridescent canopy of blues and silvers. The air was crisp, unusual for Veltara's climate, and it carried with it a tension not born of conflict, but of anticipation. Leo stood near the southern edge of the garden terrace, leaning against his carved walking stick, leg wrapped snug beneath tailored vine bandages. He was no longer limping as heavily. The wound still ached if he moved wrong, but after nearly 2 weeks of proper dressing and moderate walking, the tissue had begun to mend correctly. A thin scar traced the side of his thigh, a neat, ugly reminder of biology and consequence. Not pain, proof. Veltarans had once used the solstice gathering to honor the first bloom, the mythical moment their ancient ancestors turned from predation to cultivation. The ceremonies had always emphasized softness, petal dances, liquid light readings from flowering vines, group meditations where participants whispered to leaves in unison. This year, the program had been revised. Not publicly, not officially, but as Veltaran tradition went, any shift in the collective behavior was culture. The change came as aromas. Dozens of small fires lined the garden terraces, watched carefully by both elders and apprentices. Near each flame, local ingredients were being tested, not just roots and moss paste, but seed husks coated in spice oil, roasted bark curls, even a few brave attempts at smoking insect protein. And meat. Not Gorvak, none of them dared try again so soon, but Leo had shown them how to net and clean a breed of lowland gliders whose blood wasn't acidic. Quick, skittish things, not predatory, but not plants either. Some Velterons had taken to calling them honorable prey. Leo hadn't coined the term, he didn't even like it, but he didn't fight it either. He wasn't part of the ceremony, not officially, yet his absence would have been louder than any fire. "Will you address them?" asked Halvix, standing at his side. Leo shook his head. "I'm not a leader here, just a guest who got hungry." She tilted her head. "You led by hunger. That is older than language." He chuckled. "Doesn't make it noble." "No," she agreed, "but it makes it true." Below, in the plaza, a line of apprentice chefs, actual apprentices, now assembled at their stations. There were no judges, no rankings. This was still Veltara, after all. But the crowd was thick, the anticipation real. And the smells? Savory, complex, hints of char and earth and spice. Leo closed his eyes for a moment and just breathed. He thought of earth, of hot dogs sizzling on a summer grill, of tamales during family holidays, of midnight street tacos in college, washed down with something too sugary and too cold. Food had never been just sustenance. It was identity, memory, a way to understand someone without needing their words. And now Veltara was learning that. He opened his eyes as a group of children came scrambling up the hill toward him. They were out of breath, giddy with laughter, each one wearing a grease-smeared vine garland like the one they'd given him days earlier. One held up a stick. Leo raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" The child grinned. "It's from the fire dome. Try it. It's crunchy." He took it gingerly. It was a thin sliver of something could have been meat, could have been baked root. Lightly blackened, glazed with a sticky coating that smelled faintly of roasted citrus. He bit. Crunch. Sweet, tangy, a little smoky. Whatever it was, it worked. "Not bad," he said around a chew. "What's it called?" Another child piped up. "We call it Leo Root." He choked. Halvex's expression twitched in what might have been restrained amusement. "Please don't name food after me," he coughed. "It's weird." "But you're the first roaster," one girl beamed. "The Gorvak Burner." "Sounds like a wrestling name." "You wrestled the Gorvak?" Another gasped. No, don't spread that," he groaned, rubbing his temples. "I'm begging you." Too late, the story was already evolving. As night fell, the twin moons rose above Veltara, casting long shadows that danced across the firelight. Music played less harmonic chanting now, more rhythmic. Drummed beats layered with wind flute improvisation. It had energy, movement. It wasn't human music, but it wasn't static either. In the central terrace, a long communal table had been built, woven from reclaimed glider nests and flowering bark. At its center sat a wide bowl filled with charcoal ash and herbs, symbolic of what had burned, what had grown. Leo was offered a place. He didn't take the central seat, he wasn't foolish enough to accept implied leadership, but he sat near the cooks, listening as they described their spice choices, their experiments, their mistakes. "You were right about the herbs," one of the young botanists told him. "Some don't taste like soap, some are loud, even." Another leaned in. "We used to think seasoning was dangerous. It drew attention from predators." Leo smirked. "And now?" "Now we draw attention on purpose." He chewed slowly, savoring each bite of spiced glider tail as it sizzled off the bamboo skewer. The texture was strange, almost fish-like, but it was hot, real, nourishing. After the meal, as embers cooled and firelight dimmed, the priests performed a reading from the echo trees, a soft, harmonious tradition. This time, though, the reading included a new stanza added just that afternoon. It described the day the hunter came, not as invader, not as savior, but as a being so hungry that even fear gave way. He entered the wild with fire in his chest, and returned with smoke on his shoulders, not to teach us death, but to remind us that life, when eaten carefully, tastes like courage. Leo stared at the flames. He hadn't wanted to change anything. He really hadn't. But when the stomach growls loud enough, sometimes the world listens. Later, beneath the quiet hush of the moons, Leo lay beside the dying coals near his tent. The festival had ended. Music had faded into soft murmurs and distant dreams. He watched the stars blink through the canopy, his body finally still. His leg throbbed, but only faintly. No fever, no swelling. The scar would harden in a few weeks, maybe fade in a year. If he treated it right, he'd be running again before the next season bloom. Something rustled beside him. It was the same child as before, the garland giver. She sat cross-legged near the coals, holding a small clay dish in both hands. "I brought you something." Leo raised himself up slightly. "More liorot?" She shook her head. "It's gravy." He blinked. "Gravy?" he repeated. She nodded. "We don't really have a word for it, but you said you missed it, so we tried." He took the dish, peered inside. It was warm, brown, slightly viscous, smelled like meat drippings and something vaguely like cinnamon. He sipped. He closed his eyes. It was clumsy, a little gritty, but it was gravy. He laughed. Quietly, then louder. The stars didn't flinch. "Thank you," he said. She smiled. "Will you stay?" He didn't answer right away, just let the silence stretch. "I think I'll rest first," he said eventually. "But, yeah, I'll stay, at least a little longer." She nodded once and scampered off into the dark, dish in hand. Leo lay back, arms behind his head, firelight flickering across his face. Veltara, planet of chlorophyll and poems, had room now for spice, sizzle, and maybe even smoke-kissed meat. And for him, under 2 moons and a sky pulsing with stars, he exhaled. Not a hunter. Not a legend. Just a man who was too hungry to follow rules and too tired to argue with myths. And somehow, that had been enough.